I stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of St. Augustine's Cathedral, the air heavy with lilies and whispers. The choir's hymn floated like smoke, solemn and soft. But all I could hear was the hollow rustle of silk and the faint click of polished shoes. In the front row sat the board of directors, black suits, somber ties, and faces arranged into masks of grief. But their eyes betrayed them. I saw the flickers of satisfaction, the curve of suppressed smiles. To them, David Holloway's funeral was not a tragedy, it was freedom. I clenched my hands together, nails cutting against my palm. David wasn't just the CEO of Holloway Systems, he was my mentor, the only man in those boardrooms who had ever defended my name. I had worked 15 years to be taken seriously, and each time I was talked over, ignored, or dismissed. It was David who reminded me, "You're the sharpest strategist in the room. Don't let them erase you." And then, just days before his heart failed, he called me into his office for the last time. The memory burned bright, so vivid it drowned out the hymns around me. He sat behind his oak desk, his breathing labored, but his voice steady. "Soraya," he said, sliding a folder toward me. "I trust you more than anyone else. When I'm gone, they will circle like vultures. That's why I'm giving you this." My hands shook as I opened it. An official, notarized transfer of his 51% majority stake. I remember whispering, "David, this is everything." His reply was a tired smile. "You'll know when the time is right." Now, in the dim light of the cathedral, I looked across at the board members pretending to mourn. None of them had the faintest idea. They were already carving up an empire that wasn't theirs to claim. I let my face remain still, the perfect mask of mourning, inside. However, my chest burned with shock, anger, and something else, resolve. As the choir reached its final note, I lowered my eyes, hiding the smallest of smiles. They thought David's death gave them freedom. What they didn't know was that his final act had chained their fate to me. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. I'd love to know. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. A week after the funeral, the cathedral's silence had been replaced by the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint aroma of burnt coffee in the executive conference room. I had walked into that space countless times before, but never had the air felt so heavy, so deliberately staged. Every chair was occupied, every pair of eyes, already sharpened, turned to me the moment I stepped inside. The chairman adjusted his glasses, his voice slow and rehearsed, as though he'd been waiting years for this exact moment. "Soraya," he began. His tone dipped in false sympathy. "We've conducted a careful review of operations in light of recent changes. It's the board's decision that your position is no longer required. Effective immediately. Your employment with Holloway Systems is terminated." The words landed like stones against my chest. Terminated, after 15 years of late nights, of defending projects, of holding my ground in rooms where every suggestion I made was met with smirks and dismissive glances. This was the ending they had chosen for me. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the prickle of humiliation. They wanted me broken. They wanted me begging. Bryce, the loudest of them all, leaned forward with a mock-concerned frown. "It's nothing personal," he said, his voice just a touch too eager. "Restructuring is painful, but necessary. I'm sure you'll land on your feet somewhere, smaller." A few of the others chuckled under their breath, quickly covering their mouths as though they had coughed. I sat still, every muscle in my body taut, my nails digging into the fabric of my skirt under the table. The humiliation pressed down like a weight. They believed they were discarding me, pushing me into irrelevance, and a part of me, the part that had been overlooked and dismissed for so many years, ached to lash out, to scream, to throw the truth of my ownership across the polished mahogany table. But David's voice echoed in my mind. You'll know when the time is right. Not now. Not yet. So I forced my lips to curve into a small, controlled smile. I raised my eyes, steady, calm, and let the words roll out with a softness that startled even me. I understand. Thank you for the opportunity. The room shifted. A flicker of confusion rippled across their faces. They had expected tears, protest, anger, instead. I had given them nothing but gratitude. False, of course. But they didn't know that. Security will escort you, one of them added hastily, as if afraid I might change my mind and explode into the chaos they had prepared themselves for. I rose slowly, gathering my notebook, my pen, the small stack of papers I had brought in as a shield. My footsteps across the carpet were steady, my heart beat loud enough to drown out the whispers I could feel circling behind me. Each step was a study in restraint. When I reached the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored doors. My shoulders were straight, my eyes clear, and there, at the corner of my mouth, the faintest trace of a smile. They thought they had humiliated me. They thought they had stripped me of everything. What they didn't know, what none of them could imagine, was that I still carried David's final gift. 51%. The majority. The very thing they assumed they had taken from me. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing me away from their laughter and their whispers. Alone. I let out a single exhale, a release of the pressure building inside my chest. The humiliation was still there, sharp and bitter, but underneath it ran something stronger, steadier, patience. They believed they had erased me. What they had done, in truth, was write the opening line of their downfall. The apartment was too quiet when I pushed the door open, the cardboard box digging into my arms. The silence greeted me like a cold draft, pressing against my chest as I set the box down on the hardwood floor. For 15 years, my world had been defined by the rush of elevators, the chatter of hallways, the endless meetings where my voice was often ignored. Now, all of it had been reduced to a single box. My career, my presence, my supposed worth, collapsed into one container small enough to carry up 3 flights of stairs. I knelt down and began pulling the contents out one by one. A framed photo of my niece, her gap-toothed smile beaming at me, a stack of worn notebooks filled with scribbles, diagrams, and ideas no one had ever truly listened to, a pen that had once belonged to my mother, heavy in my hand with the weight of memory. These things were supposed to be sentimental, tokens of a life lived inside those walls. But tonight, in the silence of my apartment, they felt more like artifacts of a life that had been dismissed with 2 words, terminated immediately. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the scattered items, feeling a hollowness open inside me. The board had wanted this exact moment, to see me diminished, small, stripped of everything, alone in this space. I wondered if they were right. Maybe I was nothing more than a name they could erase from the payroll, a body escorted to the elevator. But then, buried beneath a stack of old reports, I noticed a folder, its edges neatly folded, its surface marked by David's handwriting. My breath caught as I reached for it. Slowly, I pulled it free and flipped it open. Inside lay the notarized contract, David's final gift to me, his transfer of 51% of the company's shares. My hands trembled as I touched the embossed seals, the signatures, the undeniable proof of control. For a moment, the loneliness cracked, replaced by something fiercer. This wasn't just a lifeline, it was a weapon. As I traced my finger across David's familiar scrawl, a smaller slip of paper slid loose from the folder and landed on the floor. I picked it up, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. Just 6 words, underlined once. Steady hands. Wait for the storm. The message was simple, but it pierced straight through me. I closed my eyes. hearing his voice as clearly as if he were still sitting across from me at his oak desk. Steady hands. He had chosen me not because I was loudest or most aggressive, but because he trusted my patience, my ability to withstand humiliation without breaking. Tears slipped down my face before I could stop them. Not loud sobs, just quiet streaks cutting across my cheeks. I pressed the note to my chest, clutching it as though it were a lifeline. For years, I had felt invisible, a shadow in rooms where decisions were made. Tonight, that invisibility turned into isolation. The weight of 51% felt heavier than the box at my feet. I gathered the papers back into the folder, tucking the note carefully between the pages. Then I slid everything into the locked drawer of my desk. Safe. Untouchable. Unlike me. This couldn't be escorted out of a building. This couldn't be erased with a vote. The apartment was still quiet, the city outside buzzing faintly through the glass. I sank into the couch, the emptiness pressing in. But beneath it, a pulse of determination kept me upright. They thought they had left me with nothing. In reality, I held the very thing that could dismantle them all. Loneliness filled the room, but so did the echo of David's words. I whispered them aloud into the dark, my voice steadier than I felt. Wait for the storm. Stir. The weekend should have been quiet. After the humiliation of being escorted out, after the heavy silence of my apartment and the discovery of David's note, I wanted nothing more than to disappear into sleep. But sleep didn't come. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, the glow of the screen cutting through the dark. At first, I ignored it. Then, one message made me sit up straight. They're celebrating without you. It was from Nell, one of the few colleagues I still trusted. A photo followed, grainy, taken through the window of a private club downtown. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. There they were, Bryce with his whiskey raised high, the chairman grinning wide, the other board members leaning back in their leather chairs as if they owned the city. The caption beneath the photo twisted like a knife. To new beginnings, no more dead weight. I dropped the phone onto the couch and pressed my hands against my face. Dead weight, after everything, after years of bending over backward to keep the company steady, after giving up birthdays, weekends, relationships, reduced to 2 words muttered between drinks. The betrayal was sharp, not because I hadn't expected it, but because it proved what I had always known. Their respect had been an illusion. A second message arrived. This one was a voice file. I hesitated before pressing play, but curiosity overpowered dread. The sound of clinking glasses filled my living room, laughter, low voices, and then Bryce's unmistakable drawl. First order of business. Sell off the South American division. It's bleeding cash. With Soraya out of the way, no one will fight it. Another voice chimed in, someone I couldn't immediately place. What about the patents David protected? He always kept them close. Bryce laughed. That's the beauty of it. She never had the clout to stop us. Now we can cash in, slice the company into pieces, and walk away rich. The room erupted in cheers. My stomach clenched so tight I could hardly breathe. I let the recording play twice, each time feeling the betrayal sink deeper. They weren't just celebrating my removal. They were dismantling everything David had built, everything he had entrusted me to guard. And they were doing it with the arrogance of men convinced no one could touch them. I texted Nell back, my fingers shaking. How did you get this? Her reply was quick. Waiter owed me a favor. You needed to hear it. Be careful, Soraya. For a moment, I sat frozen, the file still open on my screen. Nell's loyalty stung almost as much as the betrayal of the others. She had risked her job to send me this. She still believed in me when the board had cast me aside. That kind of faith was heavier than any document or signature. I leaned back against the couch, the recording still echoing in my head. Betrayal has a taste. I realized, metallic, bitter, impossible to wash away. They had toasted to my absence, mocked me as dead weight, and plotted to gut the company within days of David's funeral. But what they didn't know was that I had more than sentiment tucked away in my desk drawer. I had David's contract, notarized and sealed. I had 51%. And now, thanks to Nell, I had proof of their intent to betray not just me, but the company itself. The anger burned hot beneath my ribs, but I forced it down, steadying my breath. This was what David meant. Steady hands, wait for the storm. I replayed the recording once more, then saved it to a secure drive. They thought the night was theirs, but the toast they raised would be remembered as the moment they sealed their downfall. What do you think will happen when the board finally realizes Soraya isn't gone at all? Share your guess in the comments, and stay tuned. The most surprising part of the story is still ahead. By Monday morning, the betrayal still burned inside me, but anger had hardened into something steadier. I scheduled a meeting with Emily Chen, the attorney David had insisted I keep close months before his death. She was young compared to the gray-haired lawyers I was used to seeing across boardroom tables. But sharp, so sharp, it sometimes felt like she could slice through contracts with a single glance. Her office was quiet, its shelves lined with law journals and tidy rows of case files. When I stepped inside, she rose to greet me with the kind of calm professionalism that immediately steadied my nerves. "Soraya," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've reviewed the documents again, line by line. It's airtight." I sank into the chair, the weight of her words landing like a shield being strapped to my arm. Airtight. No loopholes, no cracks. Nothing the board could claw apart, no matter how many lawyers they paid. I'd been holding my breath for days without realizing it, but in that moment, I let it go. "They'll come at me the second they sense what I hold," I said quietly. "They already call me dead weight. They're planning to sell off divisions, carve the company up like a carcass." Emily nodded. "That's exactly why you can't reveal too soon. Let them expose themselves first. Every reckless move, every careless word, it will strengthen your hand. If you strike now, you'll be dragged into a courtroom fight before you're ready. Patience is leverage." Her words echoed David's note. Steady hands. Wait for the storm. For a brief moment, I felt the strange comfort of being surrounded by people who had believed in me, David in his final days. And now Emily, carrying his foresight forward. I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across her desk. She opened it, flipping through the notarized signatures, the embossed seals, the attached physician's statement confirming David had been of sound mind. Then she stopped and tapped a page near the back. "Here," she said. "This is the part most people would miss. The retention clause." I frowned. "What's that?" Emily's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. Months before he signed the transfer, David amended his will and corporate agreements. He didn't just give you 51%. He pre-signed the legal engagement that retained me as your counsel, effective the day of his death. He prepared for this exact scenario. The realization hit me harder than I expected. David hadn't acted on impulse. He hadn't trusted me at the last minute, out of desperation. He had been planning for months, ensuring that when the storm broke, I wouldn't stand alone. I pressed my hand against the folder, grounding myself. "So he knew," I whispered. "He knew," Emily confirmed. "And he trusted you to see it through." The loneliness of the past week lifted just slightly, replaced by a current of resolve. Betrayal had nearly drowned me. Humiliation had cut me open. But now I felt the truth like steel in my spine. I wasn't the board's discarded employee. I was the majority shareholder. Armed with foresight David had put in place long before they imagined their victory. Emily leaned back, studying me. "They're arrogant. Soraya. They'll overreach. They always do. And when they do, you'll be ready. Just hold steady. The storm is already gathering." I left her office with the city lights stretching before me, my grip tight around the folder, for the first time since the funeral. My steps felt deliberate, unshaken. They had called me dead weight. They would soon learn how heavy my presence truly was. The phone rang just after 8 o'clock in the evening, its shrill tone slicing through the stillness of my apartment. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but the caller ID flashing across the screen made me pause. Bryce. Of course. I let it ring twice before answering, steadying my voice into something neutral. Hello? Ah, Soraya, he said, his tone drenched in false warmth, the kind of voice people use when they think they're doing you a favor. I heard the news. Tough break. I just wanted to check in. You know, see how you're holding up. I could almost see his smug expression through the line, the faint curl of his lips, the self-satisfied gleam in his eyes. He wasn't calling out of kindness. He was calling to measure me, to confirm what the board had already decided, that I was finished. I'm fine, I replied evenly, though my hand tightened around the phone. Well, that's good to hear, he continued smoothly. Look, I know transitions like this can be unsettling, but I think I can help. I still have a lot of contacts in the industry. Maybe I could put in a word. Find you something a little more fitting. Smaller company. Of course, but somewhere you can contribute without all the pressure. What do you think? The contempt rose so sharply inside me, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. Smaller company. Somewhere I could contribute, as though my 15 years of building strategies, winning clients, and holding the line during crises had been a training exercise for a gentler, lesser job. He thought he was generous, dangling scraps before me like I should be grateful. I leaned back into the couch, letting the silence stretch a second longer than necessary. That's generous of you, I said finally, my voice calm, detached. I'll think about it. Of course, Bryce replied, pleased with himself. We have to look out for each other, right? Besides, I've got some exciting initiatives rolling out soon. Big changes on the horizon. It's going to be quite a show. I closed my eyes, shaking my head slightly, thankful he couldn't see the contempt written across my face. He truly believed he had won, that I was a discarded piece of the puzzle now forced to rely on his crumbs. He couldn't know, that I was holding 51% of the company in a folder only a few feet away. Congratulations, I said softly. I'm sure you'll make it memorable, he chuckled. We'll see. Anyway, I should let you go. Just wanted to extend the olive branch. You know where to find me if you need help. I appreciate it, I replied, my tone clipped, polite. When the call ended, I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. The recording app was still open, the red dot blinking steadily. I saved the file, labeling it with his name and the date. Evidence, a future weapon. Should I need it? The irony wasn't lost on me. Bryce had called to assert dominance, to remind me of my supposed dependence on his mercy. Instead, he had handed me a gift, his condescension preserved in his own voice, proof of his arrogance and manipulation. I set the phone down on the table and exhaled slowly. Contempt still pulsed hot in my veins, but it wasn't the wild kind that consumed. It was sharper, colder, the kind that honed itself into clarity. Men like Bryce thrived on underestimation. They thought a woman dismissed was a woman diminished. They thought kindness offered in a poisoned cup was still kindness. But I knew better, and I knew patience. I rose from the couch, walked to my desk, and slid the recording into the same locked drawer that held David's documents. 2 weapons, side by side. One was a shield, airtight and legal. The other was a dagger, sharp enough to cut when the moment demanded it. Bryce thought he had spoken down to me tonight. What he didn't realize was that he had already spoken himself into a corner. The next evening, when the city lights blurred against the rain-slicked windows, I unlocked the door to the small office I had rented 2 months earlier. It was nothing like the gleaming glass towers I'd grown used to, just 2 rooms above a bakery, the scent of fresh bread clinging faintly to the walls. Modest, private, anonymous. Exactly what I needed. I flicked on the desk lamp and set my bag down. The pool of yellow light revealed the essentials: a laptop, a filing cabinet, and a locked drawer where David's documents already waited. This was my war room. And tonight, there would be no distractions, no sympathetic glances, no mocking laughter, only me, the numbers, and the truth they refused to admit. I opened the first quarterly report and began to read. At first glance, the glossy charts looked familiar, reassuring, even, but I'd spent too many years inside those walls not to recognize the signs. The margins were thinning, revenue flat despite the bravado of press releases. Beneath the surface, the company was bleeding. As I flipped through more pages, the loneliness pressed in. 15 years of giving myself to Holloway Systems, and now I sat here, exiled, reading its decline in solitude. I thought about the others still inside: engineers, analysts, assistants, good people who didn't deserve what was coming. The board saw only numbers on a page. I saw names, faces, late-night conversations in the glow of monitors. And now, those same people were pawns in the board's hunger for quick cash. I pushed the reports aside and pulled out another file, a compilation of internal communications Nell had slipped me months ago. She hadn't said much then, only that I might need them someday. At the time, I didn't understand. Tonight, I did. Buried among the emails was a draft message that hadn't been circulated yet. My stomach tightened as I read the subject line: Proposed Workforce Reduction, Phase 1. The text was blunt, clinical, heartless, a plan to cut hundreds of jobs across multiple divisions, packaged neatly as streamlining for efficiency. There were notes in the margin, Bryce's handwriting unmistakable. Move quickly before Q3 investor call. Don't leave room for questions. I set the paper down slowly, my hands steady though my pulse raced. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was betrayal on a scale far larger than me. The board wasn't only mocking my years of service, they were dismantling the very company David had built, stripping away people's livelihoods to cover their own incompetence. For a long moment, I sat in silence, the hum of the desk lamp the only sound. The loneliness of that office wrapped around me, heavy and suffocating, yet beneath it, a sharper current stirred. Determination. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't irrelevant. I had David's majority stake, Emily's counsel, Nell's quiet loyalty, and now, written proof of their intent. I leaned back in my chair, letting the storm of emotions settle into something colder, more focused. They believed I was gone, erased, reduced to a line item marked terminated. But while they plotted in their clubs and congratulated themselves on their cleverness, I was here, in the quiet, preparing. The loneliness cut deep, but it was also my shield. No one knew about this office. No one knew about the drawer locked with both a key and a code. In this solitude, I was invisible to them, and invisibility was power. I gathered the documents into a folder, labeling it in my own handwriting: Phase 1, Evidence. My pen pressed hard against the page, the letters dark, deliberate. They wanted to erase me? I would make sure their signatures erased them first. The rain outside turned heavier, pattering against the window, a rhythm that steadied me. Alone. Yes, but not defeated. Never again. The next morning, I stood in front of the glass tower I once entered every day as an employee. Today, I returned as something else entirely. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady as I clutched the sealed envelope from Emily Chen, my attorney's letter asserting my rights as majority shareholder. The guard at the front desk blinked in surprise when he saw me. "Ms. Blake, you're not on the employee list anymore," he said, shifting uncomfortably. The board was clear. I slid the envelope across the marble counter, watching his expression shift as he read the bold letterhead. Emily's name carried weight, but the language inside carried more. It cited my right to attend any and all board meetings, not as staff, but as controlling shareholder. His eyes flicked from the document back to me. I'll need to call upstairs, he stammered. Of course, I replied smoothly. My voice betrayed nothing of the adrenaline rushing under my skin. 10 minutes later, 2 security staff escorted me toward the executive floor. But the power dynamic had shifted. They weren't escorting me out this time. They were escorting me in. The boardroom was just as I remembered. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline. The men seated around the table looked up when I entered, their surprise poorly masked. Bryce's frown appeared first, sharp and sour. "What is she doing here?" he muttered, his voice loud enough for me to hear. I walked calmly to an empty chair near the center of the table, set down my bag, and folded my hands in my lap. "Good morning," I said evenly, meeting their eyes one by one. The chairman cleared his throat. Uncomfortable. "Ms. Blake, this is a board meeting. As you know, your employment was terminated last week. You no longer have—" I slid the envelope onto the table, letting the silence stretch as they passed it around. I didn't speak, didn't rush, didn't explain. I simply watched as each man's face shifted from confusion to irritation. Bryce leaned forward. "This doesn't make sense. What is this supposed to mean?" I tilted my head slightly. "It means I have every right to be here." The words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't elaborate, didn't reveal the depth of what I held. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, hands folded, eyes steady. The discomfort in the room grew palpable. They had expected a ghost of the woman they'd discarded, a figure begging for scraps. Maybe a lawsuit, maybe a tearful plea. Instead, I gave them silence, composure, patience. The chairman shifted in his seat, shuffling papers that suddenly seemed irrelevant. "Well," he said, clearing his throat again. "We can proceed, I suppose. But understand, Ms. Blake, this is highly irregular." "Proceed," I agreed softly. Their voices stumbled at first, forced back into the agenda, but the rhythm of the meeting was broken. I could see it in their glances, the way they avoided looking directly at me, the way their words tangled as they tried to push through the motions. They knew something had changed, they just couldn't place what. I took notes quietly, nodding at intervals, never raising my voice, never challenging their words outright. The quiet was my weapon, each pause heavy with unspoken authority. Bryce finally snapped. "If she thinks sitting here will change anything, she's mistaken," he said. Louder than necessary, his glare cutting toward me. I met his eyes, calm and unflinching. "We'll see," I murmured. No threats, no explanations, just enough to unsettle him. As the meeting dragged on, their frustration grew. They couldn't read me, couldn't provoke me, and in their unease, they revealed more than they intended. Whispered side deals, overconfident projections, cracks in their unity. Every word, every slip, I tucked away for later. By the time the session adjourned, the room was thick with unease. I gathered my bag slowly, offered a polite smile, and left without another word. In the elevator, I caught my reflection again. Calm, composed, under pressure. I had given them nothing, and that nothing had unnerved them more than any outburst could have. The following morning, I walked back into the boardroom with the same calm expression I had worn the day before. Only this time, the weight in my bag was heavier, more final. Yesterday, I had given them silence and patience. Today, I would give them truth. They were already seated when I entered, Bryce tapping his pen impatiently, the chairman rearranging papers he clearly hadn't read. Their voices fell silent as I pulled out my chair and set a single leather folder on the table. I could feel their eyes on it, though none of them dared ask what it contained. The chairman finally cleared his throat. "Ms. Blake, we tolerated your presence yesterday out of courtesy, but this cannot continue. You no longer have standing here." Without a word, I pushed the folder across the polished mahogany. The envelope slid smoothly, landing directly in front of him. He hesitated, frowned, then opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His mouth parted slightly, as if the words had been pulled out of him. "What is this?" he whispered. "Read it aloud," I said, my voice steady. His hands trembled as he lifted the notarized document, the embossed seal catching the morning light. This claims that David Holloway transferred 51% of his personal shares to Ms. Soraya Blake, effective immediately. A stunned silence swallowed the room. Every face turned toward me, expressions cycling from disbelief to panic. Bryce shot to his feet. "This is outrageous! Do you expect us to believe David would hand over control to you of all people?" I met his glare without flinching. "Believe what you want. The signatures are authentic. The notarization is valid. The filing is complete. 51%. Controlling interest." The words dropped like stones into still water, sending ripples across the table. The chairman looked pale, his knuckles white as he clutched the pages. This changes everything," he muttered. "Exactly," I said. Bryce slammed his fist down. "You think you can walk back in here and take over? You're bluffing. You don't have the experience, the connections, the authority." And then, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this moment, my phone buzzed loudly against the table. Every head turned. I let it ring once, twice, before answering on speaker. "Ms. Blake, this is Victoria Hale from Anderson Holdings," came the crisp voice of our largest institutional investor. A murmur spread around the table like fire through dry grass. "Yes, Victoria," I said calmly, eyes never leaving Bryce's face. "I wanted to confirm our meeting this afternoon. We're eager to discuss the company's future under your leadership. Anderson will stand behind you." "Thank you," I replied smoothly. "I'll see you at 2. The call ended. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I could see it in their eyes. The dawning realization that the power they thought secure was gone. Bryce's face had lost its confident color. His words caught in his throat. He sat down slowly, no longer pounding the table, no longer smiling. I leaned forward, folding my hands together. "You wanted me gone. You mocked me as dead weight. And yet, here I sit, with more authority than any of you combined. The future of this company runs through me now. That isn't a threat, it's a fact." The chairman cleared his throat again, this time not to object but to steady himself. "Then, I suppose we'll need to reconvene under this new reality." I stood, gathering the folder back into my hands. "Tomorrow morning, I expect every one of you to be prepared to discuss restructuring, properly this time." As I walked toward the door, I felt the weight of their stares on my back. Yesterday, they had seen me as a ghost haunting the room. Today, they saw me for what I truly was, the one holding the strings. Power had shifted, and it was irreversible. By the next morning, the whispers had already spread beyond the boardroom walls. My phone lit up with messages from former colleagues, their words carrying a mix of curiosity and concern. "They're saying you forged documents. Bryce told HR you preyed on a dying man. They're ordering a wipe of your company email account." I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, staring at the screen. The anger came quickly, hot and immediate. They were trying to erase me, not just my position this time, but my integrity, my name, my history. 15 years of contributions reduced to rumor, dragged through the mud because they couldn't accept what was already sealed in ink and law. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, to shout until my voice broke. But David's words pulsed in the back of my mind. Steady hands. Wait for the storm. I breathed deeply, steadying the fury before it could control me. Anger could be fuel, but only if I held the match. Another message came through. This time from Nell. HR ordered IT to purge your emails. They refused without a board resolution. General counsel hasn't signed off. Cracks are showing. I reread the line 3 times. My jaw tight, but a slow satisfaction creeping in. It had refused. Someone inside had chosen principle over politics. That small act of defiance meant more than they realized. It meant not everyone was willing to bow to Bryce's bullying. I picked up my pen and began jotting notes. The fury settling into precision. Controlled anger has edges sharper than rage. It cuts cleaner. I listed every step they had taken. Slander, HR manipulation, attempted data purge. Each line was another thread I could pull when the time came. They were building my case for me. Too blinded by arrogance to see it. By mid-morning, Emily called. Her voice was clipped, professional, but I could hear the undercurrent of steel. They're desperate. They'll try everything. Capacity challenges, defamation, erasure of your trail. But they don't have the authority, not legally. Every reckless move they make only strengthens our argument. HR's already in it, I said, pacing the room. They're complicit now. They'll regret it, Emily replied. But note this. It refusing? That's important. It shows division. Once cracks appear, they widen. You'll see. I hung up, the tension still thrumming through me, but steadier now, controlled, directed. The board thought they were cornering me, but what they were really doing was showing the world their panic. Later that afternoon, Nell sent me an audio clip. The voices were muffled, but clear enough. A heated exchange between the head of IT and Bryce. You don't have authority, the IT director said firmly. You want those emails gone. Bring me a signed resolution. Until then, nothing moves. Bryce's voice was tight with fury. You'll regret crossing me. No, the IT director replied. You'll regret assuming you can. I replayed it twice, my lips curving into a grim smile. There it was, the first fracture in their fortress. Bryce, so used to commanding obedience, had finally been told no, and worse for him. I had the evidence of it. As evening fell, I sat in my quiet office downtown. The documents spread across my desk. My anger was still there, simmering beneath my skin, but it no longer threatened to explode. Instead, it sharpened into resolve. They wanted to paint me as a fraud? Let them. Every lie, every failed attempt to erase me only made their downfall inevitable. I closed the folder with deliberate care, whispering into the silence, keep pushing. Every move you make will become my weapon. The fury inside me had not vanished, but I held it now, steady as a blade. Controlled anger isn't weakness. It's the moment before the strike. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and old wood, a place where reputations could be destroyed with a single ruling. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the folder of documents resting beside me. My pulse hammered in my ears, each second stretching longer than the last. Across the aisle, Bryce and the other board members whispered urgently to their lawyers, their voices low but sharp. The judge entered, his robe flowing, and the room rose before settling into silence. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the docket. Case number 23-0415. Petition regarding shareholder ownership and request for injunctive relief. His voice was steady, detached, but to me, it sounded like thunder. Our attorney, Emily Chen, stood first, calm as ever. She presented the notarized documents. David's signed transfer of 51%, witnessed, sealed, and backed by a physician's attestation that he had been fully competent at the time. Her arguments were precise. Surgical. I watched the judge nod as she spoke, his pen scratching notes across the yellow pad before him. Then it was their turn. The board's lead counsel rose, his tone urgent, almost desperate. Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Holloway was not of sound mind when he executed these documents. He was under duress, and the transfer represents opportunistic manipulation. The words stabbed at me, but I kept my face still. David's integrity was not up for debate. Not in my mind. Still, the accusation burned, and for a moment, the old humiliation pressed against my chest. Emily rose again, her voice sharp as glass. Your Honor, opposing counsel offers speculation without proof. We submit into evidence a letter signed by Dr. James Ellison, Mr. Holloway's attending physician, dated 3 days before the transfer. It states explicitly, patient is alert, oriented, and of sound mind, capable of making legal decisions. The letter was handed up. The judge read it carefully. The silence in the room so thick it felt like it might choke me. My palms were damp against my skirt, and I forced myself to breathe slowly. Evenly, every second felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to know if I would fall or fly. Finally, the judge looked up. His voice carried the weight of finality. The documentation is valid. The court grants the request for a status quo order, effective immediately, no asset sales, no personnel changes, and no executive actions may occur without the petitioner's consent. The words hit me like a rush of air after being underwater too long. Relief washed through my chest, loosening the tension I'd been carrying since David's funeral. I exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. Across the aisle, chaos erupted. Bryce leaned toward the chairman, his face red, his voice rising despite the courtroom decorum. The attorneys tried to quiet them, but their fury was uncontained. They had lost. For all their bravado, their scheming, their smears, the gavel had struck against them. I stood slowly, gathering my folder. My legs felt unsteady, but my heart beat with something stronger than fear now. Victory. Not triumphant shouting, not gloating, just a calm, steady assurance that the ground beneath me had finally held firm. As we walked out of the courtroom, Emily leaned toward me and whispered, "That was the turning point. From here. They can delay, but they can't win." The sunlight outside felt different, warmer somehow, as if the city itself had shifted in my favor. I paused on the courthouse steps, drawing a long breath, letting the relief settle deep. For weeks, I had been carrying the weight of humiliation, betrayal, and doubt. But here, in this moment, I felt the balance shift. The board no longer held the power to erase me. Their empire had been placed in my hands, not by chance, but by law, by trust, by David's unwavering faith. I whispered into the wind, steady and sure, "This is only the beginning." The boardroom felt different the moment I entered. The air was no longer heavy with suspicion or whispers. It was sharp, electric, every eye turning toward me as I walked to the head of the table. For years, I had sat at the margins, my voice dismissed, my presence minimized. Today, I pulled out the chair at the center and sat down, not as an employee, not as a discarded strategist, as the chairwoman, the majority shareholder, the one voice that could not be erased. The directors shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding my eyes, others bristling with anger they could no longer disguise. Bryce sat near the middle, his jaw clenched, his pen tapping furiously against his notepad, as though noise alone might reclaim the control he had lost. I waited until the room quieted. Then I spoke. This company doesn't belong to egos or backroom deals. It belongs to its people, its clients, and its future. That future starts today. My voice was calm, steady, but every word landed like a hammer. I turned to Bryce. "Effective immediately. Your resignation is required. Compensation is frozen pending audit. Security will escort you out." His face went pale. For the first time. The arrogance drained from his expression. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. The silence was louder than any protest. He knew it was over. I continued without pause. 3 new directors will join this board. Independent, experienced, with no ties to past leadership. Their seats are already confirmed. This board is being rebuilt, not to serve itself, but to serve the company. A murmur spread, a mixture of shock and reluctant acceptance. They had no power to stop me. The court had confirmed it. The law had sealed it. And now, the investors had spoken. As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Victoria Hale at Anderson Holdings appeared on the screen. Full public support issued. Statement live. I looked up, meeting the eyes of every man at the table. Anderson Holdings has made their position clear. They stand with me, which means the market stands with us. The weight of the moment pressed down on them. They had mocked me as dead weight, tried to erase me, called me a fraud, and yet, here I was, steering the very company they believed they controlled. Later that afternoon, in the quiet of my new office, I opened David's old notebook. Its pages were filled with scribbles, arrows, names, and notes from meetings long past. At the very bottom of the last page, one line stood alone, underlined twice. Steady hands win wars. I sat back, the words washing over me. This wasn't just revenge, it was responsibility. David hadn't trusted me with 51% so I could humiliate them. He had trusted me to protect the company, to guard its future from men who would hollow it out for profit. The tension of weeks, humiliation, betrayal, fury, finally gave way to something quieter, deeper, liberation. I was no longer the woman escorted out with a cardboard box. I was the one writing the next chapter. That evening, as I stepped out of the building, the city lights shimmered against the glass. Employees paused in the lobby, their eyes following me, some with curiosity, others with hope. I offered them a small, calm smile. It wasn't triumph, it was a promise. The war was over, and I had won, not with rage, but with steady hands.